Hello and welcome to the world's first Paul Weller fan podcast. I'm Dan Jennings, and on this episode, our celebration of Find El Dorado continues. My guest is one of the most influential figures in the modern music industry, the current chair and CEO of Warner Music UK, Tony Harlow. This fellow was one of the bosses at V2 Records during Paul Weller's time at the label, and their professional paths have crossed once again with Paul signing back with Warner's Parlophone label for the new album. Beyond his work with Paul Weller, Tony has played a pivotal role in shaping the careers of a diverse range of artists. At V2, he championed acts like the White Stripes, Stereophonics, and Moby, while his leadership at Warner Music Australia saw him launch the global success of Ed Sheeran and Dua Lipa. This chat was intended for my upcoming Dancing Through the Fire book, and Tony has kindly let me use the audio for an episode of the podcast. So we cover his early days working at Beggar's Banquet record shop, going to punk gigs, through to joining V2 and Weller's time at the label, and the sale of that record label, the point Paul had just finished creating 22 Dreams. Tony shares his memories of working with Paul, his unique relationship with John Weller, and why he believes that Paul Weller remains one of the greatest and most enduring artists of our time. Let's get into it. Tony Harlow, thanks for joining me.
Pleasure, mate.
Lovely to see you. I mean, I'd love to do a podcast that's just about your experiences in the music industry, because my God, what an incredible career you've had. But we should stick to Paul Weller, but we'll weave some of this into there. So your first experiences of the music of Paul Weller, the Jam, the Style Council solo, I would guess the Jam, but let me check.
Well, I'm probably going to be embarrassing because I'm part of the generation when it was a bit of a divisive time. People had strong opinions. And I'm sure you've interviewed Paul about what he said about the Conservative Party and Margaret Thatcher. But let's just say it was pretty low on my list of cool things at the time. So I suppose I'd say I was lucky enough to see the Jam around that time, but they were probably not my favourite of those acts. I was deaf to the fact of Paul's talents and more thinking about whether or not he was right about Margaret Thatcher. Kind of a thing you do when you're a teenager. You know? It's a very special time in British history, this division, you know, the Thatcher government arriving and then the miners' strike and all of that stuff. And it was a very, very special time. And I'm totally open to admitting I was blinded by prejudice. But since then, I've been converted by so many people. All my friends are mad. I did go to the Jam's last stand, actually, in Brighton. I can't really remember why, but it was brilliant. I mean, those singles are amazing. And then I was very much part of the new British jazz thing, of which the Style Council were a huge part. And that was very cool. And that's sort of when I started to realise Paul Weller would teach me a lot about music.
And you were, I mean, into music from quite a young age, from my understanding. And you got to see some amazing gigs. I was reading about this in research, like Bob Marley at the Crystal Palace Bowl and the Smiths' first gig and all this stuff, right?
Yeah, I was a bit lucky. It was a very rich time, to be honest. It was like there were gigs everywhere and they weren't expensive. You know, I was looking at a gig, I was reading one of those magazines and it had a Cure gig at Hammersmith which I went to because my school was around the corner. And it was like £4 a ticket. And I don't know how inflation plays out, but £4 to see the Cure in the fourth row as opposed to $350 to see Madonna at the back of the stadium. Yeah. It seems like a good deal to me. But we were very lucky. It was like everywhere was amazing bands. And I always tell this story about how I turned up to watch a band called Orange Juice. I don't know if you know them, band, but Edwin's band. And they got stuck on the motorway, so their van broke down. And there was a note on the Moonlight Club door that said, if you came to see Orange Juice, you can have your money back or come in and see this band from Australia. And it had the name of the band crossed out and that they'd written the birthday party over it. And it was like a free gig with Nick Cave and all that madness. They renamed themselves. They weren't the Boys Next Door anymore. You know, it was that kind of time that every gig was amazing. Everywhere had a gig on, and then Tracy Thorn would be supporting Paul or something, and everywhere there was exciting music.
Now, interestingly as well, the other week we had Record Store Day. My record store where I spent stupid amounts of money was Banquet.
Oh, yeah, nice, yeah.
Wait, so you got a gig there. So the love of music, you then get a gig at the record shop, right?
Yeah. I mean, basically, I wanted to travel in America at a time when America was still a mystery and not a land of venal corruption. And I wanted to save up some money and not have something that I had to come back for. So I was super lucky. I worked in art pricing in Kingston, then met Steve and Dave at what was Beggar's Banquet in those days. Got a job there for a Christmas or two. That was a place a time, again, really exciting time when the shop was half indie music because Steve, who managed it, was in Modern English, another brilliant band on 4AD. And then Dave, who worked there, was one of the early Rare Groove DJs. And we had a lot of imports. We had a lot of DJs coming in like Danny Rampling and people like that. Nicky Holloway was local. Giles was local. Every day was coming in house music imports, Public Enemy for the first time. And a record shop with other people who've got great taste is even better.
Yeah, the original algorithm. This love of jazz, the style counts. I mean, they started out with that kind of thing, but then the thing that Paul talked to me about was, and maybe they lost some of the audience because of this, was they were always moving into different genres and stuff. So did you stick with the style council throughout?
No, not really. I mean, they were, again, it was an incidental where I quite liked what they were doing. And there was, obviously there was a movement of people at the time, and you were like, the Style Council and Sade were sort of the commercial end. Matt Bianco and Blue Rondo were a bit that I didn't much like. And then there was Working Week, who I really loved, and Tracy and Ben were doing their sort of vaguely jazzy thing. And it all fitted in with going to clubs that people like Giles Peterson were doing, where they were playing actual jazz. And although Giles is still right at the forefront of music, in those days, he was playing Blue Note records that you'd never heard before because they were hard to get. You haven't got Spotify. And so, that music all fitted in. And then it sort of all came together around, I guess, I think it's 1985 somewhere, where it was Absolute Beginners got made. Julian Temple made Absolute Beginners, and that sort of brought everyone together. And it was, a bit of a scene at the time. But it was really clubs and clothes. Paul was into that as well. For me, the first Paul record that I absolutely loved is the solo album Afterwards and Brendan's mix of Cosmos. And so that was, I was just like, fuck, this is just mind-blowing. And then from then on, he's just been amazing, I think.
I mean, it's a brilliant song anyway. The original's great, but that remix is unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, Brendan's incredible. And, I don't know what he's doing, but, he did, at that time, he was doing work for Paul and Primal Scream, and everything seemed like a bomb dropping from the sky, in the same way as Public Enemy records sounded like nothing you'd ever heard.
So we go from Blue Note Records to EMI and Down Under. I think Australia's 1997, right? So Paul's done Wildwood, Stanley Road, Heavy Soul's about to come out. What are your memories of that period of being a fan of Paul, but also how big was he down under?
He was big. They didn't do a lot of gigs down there, I don't think. I remember seeing him once down there, either the Enmore or might even have been the Metro. That time was very much determined by what John thought would work. He never built on his global ability, because if you think about those 3 albums and the songs that are on those albums, when you listen back now, those are all global smashes. They were in a headspace. I don't remember them coming a lot.
And as somebody who's then in the industry, and I know you weren't working with John and Paul at that point, that comes to the V2 time, which we'll talk about. But at that moment where you have got that huge success in the UK of an album like Stanley Road, let's say, for instance, what would you have been doing as a record boss to drive that internationally? Well,
I mean, in those days, you put your records out, they went on the radio, and you travelled. And I don't know, I'm not close enough to it to remember how much Paul did, but my sense is that he wasn't present enough in the markets. I mean, they're big songs on the radio. I was always very connected because my friends at Acid Jazz Records, Dean and Eddie, I don't know if you've interviewed either of them.
Both, yeah.
Dean is like an obsessional fan, and he's probably my best music mate. And so I was always in contact with Dean over what Paul was doing. But I don't really remember. I mean, I was busy with Australian artists at that time.
There's also that thing of, and we'll talk about David Munns in a sec, because there's a connection there, but this rejection of the final album of the Style Council. And Eddie talked to me, and Dean actually, about the fact that the music industry considered Paul to be washed up. 1990, John's taking around this demo tape and nobody's interested. It's like, no, he's done. I mean, he's like 35.
Yeah, well, I think the Style Council was quite divisive. And it's that Style Council album that you're talking about, isn't it? With that, what's now come out, and it's called House, but it's not really. You got to be back in that time, and it felt like the world was grunge and the world was Nirvana. And there's this guy who's amazingly turned out, wears all the right clothes, knows every record, but is having no truck with people slobbing around in flannel shirts. I'm not saying that Paul's taste is so all-encompassing that he probably loves the writing. It was just one of those things of being a man out of time at that particular moment. That thing of being the changing man,
Let me get this right in terms of V2. So I read in some places that you were poached to become CEO, worldwide CEO. I read in others that you were flying back for a job at EMI and then changed your mind and had to tell David Munns that you weren't interested. Clear this up for me. What's the story about coming back?
The second one is the truth.
And you literally decide on the plane back, right?
Yeah, and I quit on the first day. And David was not happy. It was just an impulsive thing that I wasn't sure I was ready to leave, and it got quite heavy in terms of you should come back and do this. And I was just recycling back into the fact that I'd done that sort of role before and I just didn't feel it. And then I remember just going home and telling my partner at the time that, I'd left. She was going nuts. And then very fortunately, the Virgin infrastructure, which I got to know very well, knew Richard really well. And I got the mixed blessing of running V2 after it was in a pretty difficult state.
So many great acts to manage, but we'll talk about Paul Weller primarily. And I've had lots of people from V2 actually on, and obviously Claire Mood and Polly and people like that. And they talk about this kind of unique nature of the label that's got obviously the backing of Branson and it's got money, but it also feels like an indie. And that culture seems to me, that's a difficult thing to create, I would have thought, that type of culture, right? But you obviously had that in mind of the type of business you wanted to create for the artists and for the staff, right?
From that point of view, I can't claim that that's my business in a way, because the business is set up by Richard. By the time I arrived, he or they had spent far too much money. And it was all about reorganizing ourselves and being a practical business. But I give a lot of credit for that for David Steele. David is the key man at V2 and he created the culture in the Holland Park office. I suppose we did some things that, we had this lovely bar downstairs that we turned into a hangout place that Paul joined us in. And we all had the principle that artists were first. And when you talk about somebody like Polly, she's like the actual example of like somebody who puts up real effort and really looks after her artists. And everybody in the company curated their acts, and that was very exciting from that point of view.
So Paul comes, the first album is, I was going to say ironically a covers album, but we'll talk a bit about that later on. Studio 150, his covers album. So taking a break from songwriting in that sense. So what are your experiences of, you signed Paul then, right?
Between me and David, and both of us would have said, like, he'd signed the Stereophonics and Paul, musical brethren. He loved Paul, I loved Paul, Malcolm Dunbar loved Paul. So we were all in agreement that we'd love to work with Paul. And John came to see us. We went to see Richard and Richard believed, and there was the deal. And John was a really unique and amazing person. And if you were prepared to lose some money at cards and could stand up after 12 White Russians, you could do business with him. But brilliant. And such good, amazing stories. He spans that bit of, I don't know how you express it today, but like that real, Paul's just been in that Blitz film. And he's good in that as well. I was laughing. It was like, you could actor, mate. John spanned that experience, from like talking about standing in the rubble of a bomb site right the way through the 80s record business. And I don't think he changed or compromised that much, neither John or Kenny.
No, it's okay. Bless Kenny Wheeler as well. Yeah. Wonderful, yeah. And obviously, his time at V2, John then starts through health, winding back. So I guess those 2-3 year period, you see a change in him, obviously, sadly.
I don't remember it much, but John wasn't the kind of manager who came in with the music. Paul became somebody who popped in and out, which was a lovely part of it. It wasn't like a major that, he popped in and out. He'd stop for a drink on a Friday night. He'd bring the music in. Obviously, he didn't fuck with the music Paul Weller brought in. I think at that time, probably that John was maybe stepping back a little bit, but it wasn't noticeable because he just didn't do that bit with us, at least.
So we get 3 albums, the covers album, Studio 150, As Is Now, and also the live album, Catch Flame, which, funny enough, I finally got on vinyl the other day. I don't think you get any money for that, you guys, these days. But yeah, finally tracked it down. And a productive period.
Well, no, I think it's a bit more than that because we made 22 Dreams and I gave the cassette to Ted Cockle. When the companies were exchanged, I went straight to Ted Cockle, who's a good mate, and I knew would A, get on with Paul and B, fully respect it and said, there's this record. It's fucking amazing. But it was a finished cassette by that stage. That was the last record in the deal.
How much were you seeing that creative process from Paul? Are you a kind of guy who'd pop down to the studios and things like that, or not really?
Paul made lots of music and you got invited to listen to it, kind of thing. He would play it to you generously, but it's Paul's music and it's always been Paul's music as far as I'm aware. It's like he knows what he's doing. He knows where his head's at. What was interesting in that period was talking to him about things like records that were exciting and collaborating. He was in a bit of an Alice Coltrane phase and we would talk about how strange it was that people thought that Alice Coltrane is now more interesting than John Coltrane and things like that. We'd swap records. I remember playing him the Algerian singer Saad Massi and he recorded with her, I think. And I remember him bringing in a duet he'd done with a girl called Amy Winehouse that was quite good too. We have to be very clear, about myself and probably David as well, about Paul Weller. Paul Weller is a genius. He doesn't need any help from record company people.
He's not the kind of artist that you need to shape, sculpt, talk to about direction. And also, I'm guessing he wouldn't be particularly open to that maybe anyway, right? He's got a kind of certain vision of where he wants to take the music.
I think he's really clear. I think he's never not been a listener. Like he's interested. He's totally interested. There's loads of new bands he's put us onto, and that time was a time of the kind of libertinesy explosion. I think he loved a band of ours called The Rakes. I think he put them on to support him. He's just a generous person, but he's a music person. But at the end of the day, Paul Weller knows what Paul Weller's music is. He doesn't need anyone to go and say, well, maybe you should change this mix. And I think probably that's where, at the end of the Polydor days, he didn't appreciate being told that where his head was at wasn't where their head was at. But I don't know that for a fact. You'd have to ask him.
Let me ask you about the end of V2 then. So you oversaw the sale and the into Universal, if I'm right in saying. What was it? Was it that just the V2 thing had run its course, or was it ran out of money, or Branson stepped away? What was that?
V2 was a complicated partnership. David and I were tasked with doing was to get the business, and Andy Gershon in America, was to get the business profitable and sellable. And I think we did that. And, we made a lot of exciting music, but really I think it was more to do with, we were coming into 2009. We were partnered with a merchant bank, with a big bank in America. They went into a crisis and their financial structuring required certain things. And that just was the time when it had to happen, which was a real tragic thing for a lot of amazing people who I worked with. I'm totally grateful to Sir Lucian Grange for his belief that the artists were good. He insisted that certain people stayed to make sure that the transition was good for artists. And, as a result, Stereophonics made a couple of records for Jason Eiley at Mercury. Block Party stayed for a bit. He was very careful to integrate properly.
And so at that point, Paul had done 22 Dreams, which is seen as a real, he's talked about this as well, as being a kind of real game changer of an album for him, in the sense that he wanted to make the album that he wanted to make for him. The fact that everybody loved it, this mad double album, he delivered that to you as something that was going to be put out on V2 then, by the sounds of things.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And I think that's when you look back to why he was able to do exactly what he wanted on the record. I don't know if he would acknowledge it because I'd hate to speak for him, but I feel like that was because we had a very respectful view. We were obviously thrilled when he delivered Floorboards, because we were like, oh, wow, this is the record. We've been needing that kind of visceral energy for a while from Paul. And then we were thrilled with Studio 150. We were just happy to be in business with one of the greatest artists in UK music history, if not the greatest, So, we were really excited. And when he came in with this record I'm not sure if it's sort of eccentric. It seemed to me now, looking back, it was kind of ahead of all of shuffle culture. It was like Paul Weller doing music he liked in all sorts of genres and completely freed from the context of this album must sound like this. Whereas I guess As Is Now probably is a record where you look at and say he was trying to make a statement about being super relevant in that generation of people with really strong guitar records, Block Parties, Libertines type of thing. And then this record was an explosion of colour. Amazing record.
I read also that you then moved to Bravado, which also has the Weller connection, right? So they do so much of his kind of merchandising and licensing and stuff.
The Bravado thing was a kind of fun thing. And again, grateful to Lucian for allowing me to go back into P&L business. And I didn't realise at the time how different that business was, how much I'd learned. And it was an amazing experience. I don't recall Paul and John in that period. Paul always hated all band merch.
Did he?
Yeah, it's like Tat. Paul's the best dressed man in music. He was like, yeah, people want to buy it, but I don't care about it. I think that still stands today. You go to the show, there's one T-shirt usually.
Yeah, I've never seen Paul Weller in a Beatles T-shirt or anything.
It's just not him, He's whatever Paul Weller's wearing, you ought to be wearing.
Yeah.
And T-shirts isn't part of that.
I think that's my favourite quote of this entire series. I love it. A lesson for us all. I look terrible in his stuff. That's the problem. I've not got his physique.
It's very difficult to wear a 3-button mod suit if you're not straight down.
So we go down to Australia, but then come back as chairman and CEO of Warner Music in 2019, by which time Paul's at Parlophone, so one of the labels, but coming towards the end of that deal. But was there any connection around that time?
No, he actually left just before I got back, and I was looking at it going, why had someone let Paul Weller leave the company? I don't know, it suited him, but we never interacted at that time. If I'd been back for longer, I think he left in 2019, I got back in 2020. And if I'd been there, I'd have fought for it. But also I will say Tom March and Ben at Polydor wanted him, did an amazing job, bang off, superb job. Maybe that's the kind of energy he needs to change around and see different people. But I would have fought harder if I'd been there, but it was before my time.
Some great albums on that label. We're talking Kind Revolution, Saturn's Pattern. True Meanings is unbelievable. And that Other Aspects gig, just some really great LPs. And then that return to Polydor, we get On Sunset, Fat Pop, 66. Just brilliant.
Really great, but also I think an incredibly rich time in the live band. So the 66 live shows, really, really good. I felt like at a certain point, there was a bit of a drift going on, and then suddenly it's back, the double drummer thing, and just reminding you of what Paul Weller really is about. I think personally, like that period, the live band was really good.
Paul's back with Parlophone. Claire said to me about the fact that they do one album deals these days. And
she promised me two, but
okay. Well, I suppose one of them's a covers album. Does that even count?
One's a covers album and one is a catalogue album.
Talk to me about how Paul gets back on Parlophone and how involved were you in that deal, or have you been?
Spoke to Claire and she said, "Are you interested?" And I was like, "Of course." And we shook hands. And it was as simple as that. And then Paul came in for a meeting with the team at Parlophone. And obviously, whenever anybody meets Paul Weller, apart from like falling over themselves to get in the room, they love him because he's so direct. He played us a couple of songs from the covers record. And everyone was like, yeah, we're in for that. Yeah, hopefully it'll be a fruitful relationship. I mean, Claire's right in the sense that they know what they're doing. And so it's a very easy thing, you know.
It's a different type of approach, this album, from what I've understood, in the sense that they don't want to do loads of marketing. Paul talked to me about not necessarily, well, I don't think doing any live gigs at the minute. He just wants a bit of a rest from all that, right? But also not sure where he wants to take it next, in a way.
I don't know about that because it did feel like this is a battery recharge. And then he'll have a look and see what it is. But they're brilliant. The only thing I'd say about it is that if I looked at Studio 150, probably the covers were quite relatively mainstream, you know, Wishing on a Star and things. And I think that this one, he's really dug in the record collection. And there are some surprises for fans and really incredible creation that's going to excite people and go, oh, I can't believe that song is that great. He's sort of curated in a way. I don't know if you've got that thing that he did, the sweet soul music of Paul Weller, delivered for Ace, but his ability again to switch from being an artist to a fan and find those things that are just more exciting is part of what you're going to get on this record, and it's really special.
Well, I was in the studio when Craddock was putting a bit of bass down on... Nice. I'm trying to remember what the song was now. The top of Small Town Talk.
The Bobby Charles.
And that
reminds me, we've just issued an album. I should make sure Paul gets that. Actually.
Bobby Charles?
Yeah, well, the Bobby Charles Bearsfield session became a record store day.
Oh, nice.
Extremely good. It has that kind of pastoral folk thing that Paul did so well in that early 90s period.
Where's that thing? It just stuck in my head for days, that song. And I'm like, oh my God, if the rest of the album's like this.
That's a really great song as well. Kind of like it's got enough groove. So Craddock's kind of caught the groove of it.
As somebody who's worked in the industry for as long as you have, and Paul, you know, there have been ups and downs, but here's a guy who, I mean, I don't know if he's ever really got his dues, but and it's been interesting doing this entire project, so the podcast and the book and stuff, where some people talk about like him being up there with Lennon and McCartney as a songwriter and stuff like that. Where's your view, and why do you think he's lasted? Why is it there's still this excitement at a record label of going, my God, we've got Paul Weller, we want to get Paul Weller?
There are different answers to that, because one of the things is the concept of fandom and people being so excited to get a chance to meet him and work with him. On a very personal level, there's some artists who are like that for me, but you might not do their record because it's not what they're doing now isn't amazing. With Paul Weller, he constantly is making music that you want to hear. Even if it's a covers record, he will have picked more interesting songs. He'll have thought about the arrangements in a cleverer way. He'll have added Jacko to the arrangement and it'll work. And I think that the reason he's got longevity here is because he's never looks back. In that way, the nearest equivalent is Dylan. I can imagine Paul writing Modern Times or Time Out of Mind in another 10 or 15 years when he feels like it, and speaking better than anyone else to those not dark yet kind of concepts. To me, he's like Dylan. Always influences, always listening, always hearing, always trying to find new young musicians to be excited about. And so the music's always exciting and relevant, and that makes it important here. In terms of dues, I think when you go through the lists, look, it's an America thing. Very simple. It's like, despite the quality of the songs, for whatever reasons, and I don't know what they are, and they could be to do with when they toured or what record company executive backed him or how it was, but he never got the dues in America. And when you think about what he does, he's one of the greatest singer-songwriters. He can play big rooms there, but he's not got that part of the profile, so people don't go, he's not in the pantheon in the same way as other people. He should be. He just isn't. The other thing about Paul, by the way, is we've talked about music arrangements, choices. He's an amazing singer. No one would have thought when you heard In the City that this person was going to turn into the person who would sing, Pebbles on the Beach and things. He's just an incredible singer, and his voice changes and matures all the time. So it's always, oh God, this is exciting to hear this. I think there's different answers. Like, the fact is everyone wants to meet and be near Paul Weller because he's genius. On the other side, when you just look at the music, people will always sign Paul Weller because he's always making brilliant music.
And also such a nice guy. I mean, I've met him a few times now. He's so, I mean, you when you're in his company, after a couple of minutes, you forget this is Paul Weller, the guy, the star that I'm watching on stage. It's just like, just seems such a normal bloke. It's weird.
Yeah, well, he's a down-to-earth person. If you had the privilege of meeting John, which you probably didn't, you're like, John and Anne, well, it's like he's not gone far from the roots, and he's not forgotten that, it's about Saturday night and dressing up smart and having music and music on 45, and all those things are part of Paul Weller, and that makes him like, he never forgot. There was never a period with Mick Hucknall in a castle in Spain with 12 models. That bit didn't happen. Or if it did, it was very briefly around the Star Council.
This has been so lovely. I've got one final question for you. So I asked this of all my guests. You're allowed one Paul Weller song for the rest of your life. It could be the Jam, the Star Council, or solo. What would you go with?
God, that's a really, really hard question. Sunflower? Oh. No, Wildwood.
He's already corrected himself. I love it.
Yeah. It's just there's too many. He's like, you can't do a 1 to 25. You have to do a 1 to 50. Wildwood, because vocally amazing. The vibe is great. He got everything right. He's hit that peak a lot of times, but I suppose I feel like Wildwood is the one where I just like clicked in and thought, amazing, genius.
This has been lovely to talk to you, Tony. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Lovely to speak to you, Dan. Sorry you polluted it with some of my boring career, but as long as you stay true to talking about Paul, it'll be fine. Really nice to meet you, Dan.
My thanks once again to Tony Harlow for finding the time to chat for the book and the podcast. Really appreciated. If you want to find out more, check out the show notes for this episode, paulwellerfanpodcast.com, and get your orders in. Hear all sides of the story. Paul Weller, Dancing Through the Fire, the authorized oral history, is available for pre-order right now. Paul Weller's story from childhood right the way up to Find El Dorado, that brand new beautiful album that Paul Weller has just released. Still to come on the podcast, episodes from Declan O'Rourke on the way to chat through that album opener, Handouts in the Rain, plus Amelia Coburn, who features on the new album as well, and the song One Last Cold Kiss. Special episodes on the way, so make sure you follow, you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, spread the word on social media, grab yourself a virtual coffee as well on my website, paulwellerfanpodcast.com. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.